In this video, we're going to teach you the 8 rules for correct stroke order when writing Chinese characters. We've already made a video on the importance of stroke order, and you can watch that here, but here are some top reasons why stroke order is important for a learner. Now, before we learn the 8 rules, there are a few things to bear in mind. Number 1, we created this list with learners in mind and limited our selection of characters to the 100 most common ones. You're not only going to learn the rules, but get to learn high-use characters as well. Number 2, these rules are actually more like guidelines, and there are plenty of situations where characters might not follow the exact rules. Number 3, Chinese is a rich and complex language, and there are some stroke order variations depending on the region. Luckily, Skritter allows for these variations, so it doesn't matter which rule you follow. And finally, while it's useful to know these rules, if you study with Skritter, you will actually learn them implicitly, since we only allow for the strokes in the correct order. So if you keep getting it wrong, we'll actually subtly nudge you in the correct direction. For example, before we scripted this video, I didn't know many of these exact rules, but I can confidently write most unknown characters based purely on my use of Skritter. In general, Chinese characters are written from the top to the bottom and the left to the right. This means that you normally begin in the very top left corner and work your way down to the bottom right corner in this direction. So here are the 8 rules you need to know. Rule number 1, top to bottom. Open section 1 of the app and we have 3 characters that demonstrate this rule. 2 is written like this, and 3 like this.
3.
And the character for work is like this, from top to bottom.
公
Rule number 2, left to right. Chinese is actually made up of building blocks called components, and in general we complete one component before moving on to the next one. So in this section we have 2 characters like that. First complete the left part, and then move on to the right part. And remember, it's top to bottom and left to right. So you write it like this. Rule number 3, left sloping strokes before right downward strokes. For this rule, we write the left sloping stroke first. Each stroke in Chinese calligraphy has a specific name, and if you're interested in watching that, you can watch it here. 1 is another good example to learn this with. It follows the first rule of top to bottom, and then you do the left sloping first, followed by the right downward stroke. Rule number 4, horizontal strokes before crossing vertical strokes. This character means 10, and this is the hand gesture for 10, since it looks like the character 10. When writing it, you do the horizontal stroke before the vertical stroke. If we look at this word for big, we do the horizontal stroke first, and then we finish off by following rules 3, left downward stroke before right downward stroke. Okay, we're halfway there, you got this. Rule number 5, and this doesn't have a very good name. Framing strokes before box contents, but closing strokes last. So let's break that down. The most basic framing component is this. First, we do a top to bottom stroke, rule 1, then a right angle, and finally finishing off by closing out the bottom. The character for day follows a similar pattern, with the final stroke closing it all off. With this character, there's a big component trapped inside of that framing box. Since you do the closing stroke last, you actually complete the enclosed component in the box before sealing it up. Rule number 6, skewering strokes last. What this means is that if there's a vertical stroke that cuts through the character, you generally write it last. So the character for zhong, as in Zhongguo, gets a skewering right at the end. For ban, we go from top to bottom, left to right, and finishing off with a skewering stroke, since it goes all the way through the character. Rule number 7, symmetrical additions last. Take a look at these 3 characters. They all have some element of symmetry. First, we begin with a central stroke, then we move from left to right, finishing off with the symmetrical addition last. So with small, 小, we start in the middle and end with the final symmetrical addition. Finally, rule number 8, additional dots last. These 3 characters all have one thing in common. They have a dot component in them. This is typically written last.
寸
Now that you know these basic principles, you should be able to write most characters. And if you get something wrong, Skritter will automatically show you the right way to do it. If you want to study the stroke order in more detail, you can tap on the teaching mode or long press on the screen to show the next stroke. If you keep getting it wrong, we will actually prompt the correct one. Over time, you'll learn all of these rules implicitly, and since Skritter uses spaced repetition, we will show you the ones that you get wrong more often to ensure that you don't forget them. In the final section of this free deck, we have put together a list of common characters that have various combinations of these 8 rules. You can test yourself at any time in this section by deselecting these toggles and just testing your writing. We hope you enjoyed this lesson on Chinese stroke order, and good luck learning this deck.